Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on mastering the ICT Supply Chain Security Management SCS 9001 standard, training courses for certification success. We are happy to have Mike Regan, VP of Business Performance at TIA, as well as Chad Kymal, CTO of Omnex, here to present on this important topic for us today. Mike Regan leads the activities of the Telecommunication Industry Association's Quest Forum with a focus on business performance improvement standards and associated activities. Prior to joining TIA, Mike completed a successful 30-plus year career as a senior engineering leader. He has led large organizations delivering complex communications and networking products deployed in the business-critical production networks of premier public service providers, global cloud platforms, large enterprises, and customer engagement centers. Chad Kymal is the CTO of Omnex, Inc., an international consulting, training, and software organization headquartered in the United States. He spent several years working at General Motors and KPMG and helped develop the first integrated software for FMEA called AquaPro in 1988 for Omnex. He has spent more than 20 years in system, hardware, and software development in various capacities and participated in the writing process for the SCS 9001 standard. Without further ado, Chad, why don't you take it away?
So I believe I'll actually start. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Regan. Let me apologize in advance. This is what I look like when I'm sick as a dog. I may need to go on mute on occasion to cough up a bit of my lungs, but we'll try to get through this today. I appreciate your time and interest, and I certainly want to express our appreciation for our good partners at Omnex in helping us in the collaboration of developing these training courses. What I hope to do is to kind of set the baseline for the origin of the standard, why it's been developed, what types of problems it's trying to solve, and how it goes about doing that. We'll talk about areas of government intercession, which is starting to become more and more invasive, probably in virtually every vertical in which we operate. And then Chad will go through an extensive review of the training courses. So if we could start with the first slide, please. And I'm going to go on stop video. All right, so nothing new here. And we've had a heavy set of webinars the last couple of months at TIA. You might have seen some of these slides. I'll move through them quickly, but we'll make the slides available for your review. And if there's any questions, by all means, follow up with us. We all know the problems of cybercrime. The bad actors are they're attacking everything. There is no safe network. There is no safe device. Home devices, mission critical, life critical, water systems. I mean, CISA, the government's most highest rated security agency, was hacked recently. The costs are unsustainable. Attempts to improve so far to date have not really generated material improvements. The frequency and severity of the attacks continue to come. It is really a serious situation. Next slide. All sectors are vulnerable. There is no, if you are internet connected, you are vulnerable. It does not matter what type of network you run, what vertical you run, what type of organization you have. Next slide, please. Examples of devices that have very well-known attacks and increasingly come: traditional telecom cable networks, Wi-Fi networks of all type, increasingly IoT, industrial IoT, satellite systems, the growth of low Earth orbit internet access services, data centers, cloud services, smart buildings, increasingly now connected vehicles is an area of concern with the government. There's really nothing off limits. I don't intend on being too shocking with this assessment. It's the reality of what we're dealing with. Next slide, please. You know, one of the things that's always true in technology and networks is nothing stays the same. Constant change, constant evolution. With that evolution, you know, no sooner than some level of improvement is made, then the attack surface, the threat landscape changes. with changes in the types of networks, modern networks, functionally decomposed networks that are now being used. Huge use of open source in all kinds of applications, and supply chain especially. That is what the standard is really focused on. Simply, focusing on cybersecurity and information security is not enough to protect yourselves. Next slide, please. Mobile architectures are changing dramatically. 5G are more complex than 4G. 6G will be more complex than that. The number of cells increases, the attack surface. The fact that the networks are functionally decomposed, trying to drive competition, the introduction of many new earlier stage vendors that don't necessarily have a history of quality and security in their operations that you as a customer of these devices and network services can depend upon. Next slide, please. And a further area of interest, and one that we are now focused on, is IoT. The incredible growth of IoT, the attacks that are now being witnessed in these types of devices, industrial control systems. These are perhaps some of the most serious types of attacks in critical sectors. This standard, I believe, as you'll see, will also serve and provide good benefit in the IoT vertical. Next slide, please. So cybersecurity isn't a new topic. Supply chain security, perhaps a little more so. We are a volunteer member-driven organization. It's not like people at TIA, huddle in a back room and decide to come up with new standards because it's so fun to do that. Our membership comes to us. They raise the challenges that they're seeing, the concerns that they have. They propose what types of new standards would be a benefit to the industry. And then they donate subject matter experts to develop these standards and maintain them for the betterment of industry. And what we have been seeing over the last several years is supply chain attacks are definitely a new area where the frequency is increasing at a very rapid rate. Next slide, please. And one of the things certainly is in software supply chain. We are in a heavily software-centric world as compared to networking equipment from 15 or 20 years ago. A lot of complex software leveraging open source, running on commodity hardware, and the bad actors have certainly recognized this and have started to introduce more and more attacks on supply chain. Next slide, please. Next. So the motivation behind our work is, we are an industry association. We exist solely for the benefits of our members. And we're watching the trends that are happening. We're watching global governments increasingly interceding and making demands across all ICT sectors. We talk about innovative new network architectures that increase the attack surface, open source. We're seeing trends now of reshoring and nearshoring of production facilities as part of critical supply chain consolidation. So, gains that may have been made in the past may not be preserved in the future, as the devices are going to be built in different places by different people, hopefully following the same proven processes. But what is expected to happen isn't always what happens. Explosive growth of connected devices, there's many more things to attack. Continued expansion of cloud solutions, and there's been some very prominent failures in cloud solutions, including one of I won't name them, but a password protection service got hacked and everyone's passwords were leaked. I mean, if you're going to identify maybe the type of attack you'd like the least, having all of your passwords leaked is probably at the top of the list, and that happened. And then also the competitive internet services growing through low Earth orbit satellites that are growing crazy through Amazon Kuiper as an example. We're also seeing challenges reemerging around quality management. And one of the things, and the reason that we developed this standard, is we looked at the available works at the time, and we found that there really wasn't anything that addressed sufficiently supply chain. Next slide, please. If I'm asked one question the most often, it's like, well, we have a 27,001 program. Isn't that sufficient, right? We're protecting ourselves. And the short answer is not close to protecting yourselves. 27,001 is a great global standard, widely deployed. It's focused on information security. We focus on supply chain security. And what I think the industry needs to start doing is stop thinking of these as compartmentalized topics. Personal privacy, endpoint security, information security, cybersecurity, now supply chain security. The industry needs to start looking at all of this as holistic, and you will only be as well protected as the weakest link in your strategy. So SCS 9001 is a very large standard intended to provide a pretty significant overlay over many existing works. Next slide, please. And it is designed to be a certifiable process-based standard. Within Quest Forum, we are historically advocates of independently certifiable standards. Now, we're not zealots. If people want to use our standards for their own internal purposes and have internal auditing functions and think that they can gain benefit by that, we're all for that, and we fully support that. But for the types of problems that are being experienced right now, and the fact that we have not made progress, we do believe that independent certification is appropriate to try to solve this particular problem. The standard is intended for a customer to assess their vendors, that they operate with integrity, transparency, and can be trustworthy, that they conduct all aspects of their operations with a very high level of consideration to security, everything within their organization, not just the development life cycle, everything within their organization. It's our belief that if you had bad IT practices and bad patching of development system practices, that you can't be trusted to deliver secure products. We make sure that the required controls are in place to manage the security of the supply chains and to hold vendors to a higher standard. And that the industry's made requisite investments to support products through their complete operational lifetime, including the ability to identify, mitigate, and resolve vulnerabilities found post-deployment much more quickly than might have been the historical norm. The days of, okay, we'll fix that security hole in the next release in 3 months has long since passed. This doesn't happen by accident. It requires a level of process re-engineering within the development organization to be able to continuously and proactively look for new vulnerabilities post-product release, patch them, mitigate them, deliver fixes much quicker, measured in hours to days instead of weeks to months to maybe quarters in the past. Next slide, please. And I'll touch a little bit on government intercession. Excuse me. One of the functions of TIA is a very active global affairs organization. And I myself sit on a number of government agency boards, including the FCC Technical Advisory Council. We are regularly sought out to speak at government events. We interact with NTIA, CISA, NIST all the time. They have actually reviewed and provided commentary to our standard. I'll focus on some examples with the US federal government here, but this is happening globally. And in fact, in some cases, you might say that the US is lagging a little bit some other countries in putting in more discipline around security procedures. Next slide, please. In March of last year, the US government released what they call the US National Cybersecurity Strategy. If you have not seen this, if you have not read it, I strongly encourage that you do. It is interesting to see that what the government has forecasted in this strategy, it is actually acting upon. We are seeing it. This was not a paper exercise. They are very serious about this, and this seriousness has extended across administrations. It started in the last one, and it's been continued in this one. Next slide, please. Areas that we are engaged with the US government on some of their initiatives. This is an eye chart. I won't go through everything, but they are looking at just about everything you can think of in how to improve the security posture of US industries and especially critical infrastructure. And when you look at the 16 categories of what they define as critical infrastructure, I would guess that most of us have some involvement in it in some way. Next slide, please. NIST and CISA, kind of with different targets, are producing new publications, frameworks, recommendations at a really head-spinning level. And we take every single one of them. We actually contribute and help review and improve them. As examples, I was part of the review of the cybersecurity framework version 2.0. They had some supply chain protections for the first time in that. But we go through all of the different government initiatives and we make sure that our standard continues to evolve and improve to be extremely well aligned. So while I will never say that certifying to this standard gives you a complete level of safety that you never have to worry about, supply chain security again, or that you're fully compliant with every government initiative, from the work that we've done, we're like probably mid 90% coverage with all of these different works. So if there's one thing to take a look at that's going to really raise the confidence in how you're operating your businesses and how you're setting expectations of your vendors, I think we've done a pretty good job with this standard. Next slide, please. And also on CISA, they are looking at some different kind of goals and use cases, but we've done the same here. When you look at the different CISA initiatives, and these are all readily available on both the CISA and NIST websites, it's good, very good work, very good publications. If you do nothing else, pick a couple that might apply to your particular line of business and read it. I think that you will benefit by it. And if you want to talk about any of these in more detail, by all means, we'd be glad to do it. Just contact us at another time. Next slide, please. And this will be my last slide. In the interest of full disclosure, when I was an engineer, I used to hate the notion of standards. I was a young, brash engineer, so was my development teams, and we thought we knew everything. We didn't. I've earned my gray hairs. So what I have learned through this process is developing and deploying and getting a new standard, especially one of this complexity into industry, it takes a long time. People that have been doing this for a career continue to encourage me that it's going extremely well and just keep pushing. We are glad to have advocacy from our government, and we have worked with the U.S. Departments of State and Commerce. They have a goal of keeping bad actors out of new global network builds. In Latin America in particular, that continent, Costa Rica in particular, has been just mercilessly attacked. So bad that there was a national state of emergency. They had to shut down many government systems. They're actually running the government by paper and pencil for an extended period of time. Just unheard of. They're about to embark on building out a brand new national 5G network, and they were really concerned about making sure that they do everything within their control to make it the most secure network and that they pick the best, most trustworthy vendors possible. And so our government contacts introduced us, and over the course of a year, we had many discussions and visits with the agencies of Costa Rica, ultimately leading to them selecting SCS as a national standard and it as a requirement of their tender. That has now kind of started the dominoes falling, where we are in discussions with, I believe, at least 6 other countries that are looking to learn from Costa Rica's decision and follow the same path. And we're now being introduced into other countries within the globe as well. So we're seeing the momentum start to build. Very soon within the SCS work group, we will be making an announcement of one of the most premier technology companies on the planet joining our work group to help develop and evolve SCS for consumer devices and IoT devices. That announcement will be coming soon. But the momentum has started to happen with this standard. I encourage you taking a look at it. I encourage you to strongly consider the Omnex training courses. They are exceptional. It will save you time, money, and effort. And the goal is to improve the security posture across our entire country. And I hope you see that there's value in this. Thank you for your time. I'm going to go on mute now. Over to you, Chad.
Mike, thank you very much. Let me just start by spending a few minutes talking about the SCS 9001 2024. Mike has done a wonderful job, and TIA has done an incredible job in writing this standard or handbook. It is by the telecommunications industry. People writing it are all in the industry, trying to help the industry become better. So this handbook or standard is specially designed to ensure the security and supply chain. That's one of the big differences in this standard is it thinks about the supply chain needs of the ICT industry. I'll just say this also. It is not specific just to the ICT industry. It can be used, as you can see, by governments. It can also be used by, let's say, anybody interested in IoT or sensors. And those are all the use cases that you will see as we propagate the standard. And very large organizations are looking at adopting this. So what is it? It is a common set of supply chain security management system requirements uniquely for hardware, software, and services. And on top of that, these requirements are built on existing industry standards, but it was benchmarked. And I can just say, as somebody who deals with many different standards, this is the most robust standard I have seen. And I can highly recommend that we adopt this if you really want to have a high security posture. One of the unique features of the standard includes performance measurements. There are 7 performance measurements. It's a recommendation going in line with what the TIA has done with previous standards. Eventually, maybe it can be used for benchmarking and comparisons between companies. So what is the goal of the SCS 9001? It is to foster management systems that effectively and efficiently protect the security and use of hardware, software, services, a common set of security management systems. Very importantly, folks, if we don't adopt a standard, we're going to be dictated multiple security management systems. And I can tell you, as running an organization that includes software, this is what's happening to many of the people in the supply chain if we don't adopt a posture of having one standard. Of course, effective performance-based measurements. In TIA, you need to measure your processes, and then on top of that, there are 7 measurements that you can adopt, which are security SCS 9001 performance-based measurements. And of course, very importantly, to drive continual improvement inside your organization, and the standard is specially built to help the customer organization and the supplier relationships. And these are some of the benefits we hope to get out of SCS 9001. Continual improvement. I'll just jump around a little bit here. Efficient management of external audits and site visits, so we're not audited multiple times in different standards. And through that, overall cost reduction, and then a focus on value where you increase competitiveness. If I had to summarize the whole standard, this security SCS 9001 architectural model says it all. It's built on something called a principles of trust, because in the end of the day, the relationship between the customer and the supplier is built on trust. So this is where really SCS 9001, the audit will start on this principle of trust. And then on top of that, policies, very broad set of policies that the company has to adopt for cybersecurity. And this is one of the only standards where I've seen zero trust architecture. So you can see the zero trust architecture, and then you can see the asset inventory and management, one of the bases really that cybersecurity is built on. And then you can see 7 different processes, from event incident management to software usage, very importantly, OSS, open source software, and counterfeit parts. And then what you see is the clauses or the requirements of the SCS 9000 itself as a layer. Then on top of that, so many of the controls are built on these the requirements of SCS 9001, but in Annex A, similar to Annex A in 27001, we have standalone controls, 60 standalone controls from access management to systems and information integrity. And then top of that are optional 7 measurements. I highly recommend them because they're very succinct, and this will be a means by which you can evaluate how well you are doing. So as we mentioned, if you look at all the different cybersecurity standards out there, very uniquely, SCS 9001 was built not only for yourself, but for your supply chain. Why? Because we're only as strong as our weakest link. Can you imagine one little software, among everything else we have, or one piece of hardware in this network or system that is, flawed and has a Trojan in it? And you can imagine how the whole system, and then from there it'll spread across, because we're talking about basic building blocks inside the organization. So a certifiable process-based standard to assist certifying organizations and their supply chain. So this is a very powerful standard. Folks, what we have done, TIA, has carefully looked at the needs of the organizations implementing it and auditing it. And these are the training courses we developed together. And when you think about this training, you need to think of it as in terms of an overall implementation. By the way, we'll teach you this implementation process and how to go through the implementation in maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months at max. Of course, it could be shorter, but depends on where you're starting from. So you can see here the idea of making the decision. So that's the most important thing, and that's where this SCS 9001 introduction training comes in place. There's no cost to it. It's on demand. So take a look at this SCS 9001 introduction training and then start the implementation process. And you have an implementation team. So we have to train this implementation team. They have to understand the standard and they have to implement the standard. So it's 4 days, 2 different classes. And then, of course, you develop your processes, you develop your metrics, you put your controls in place, and then we roll out the documentation. In other words, we train everybody in the organization, and then we have to conduct internal audits. So we call it just-in-time training. So we try to do the training for internal auditors before they do it. So the same 2 days of understanding with 3 days of auditing. So really, that is what we have developed. And this is the introduction class, okay? So if you want to think about sort of the decision tree in terms of where the training comes in, number 1, decision to proceed with SCS 9001, which I think, there's no other standard for the supply chain. And let me just also say this, as actually I teach in the ISO 27001. I developed the training many years ago for Omnex, and I did the lead auditor course. I can tell you it's night and day in terms of what the higher level of controls, customized controls in terms of trying to ensure your security posture. Once you make that decision, you have to develop your implementation team and implementation leader, and at the same time, develop your audit team. So there comes the understanding requirements. The left-hand side with the implementation teams go through the implementation training. The right-hand side, the auditors go through the auditor training. And folks, don't forget, in the end of the day, we have to train everybody in the organization on cybersecurity basics. From phishing, and by the way, if you adopted one of the performance measurements in SCS 9001 in the Annex B, one of the things we would do is send out phishing emails inside the organization to see how many people are vulnerable to phishing. So I don't have to tell you why train. So I've spent the last 40 years of my life implementing various standards, writing various standards, training various standards. In fact, it is almost impossible to implement without training. If you do it without training, you may go off kilter and spend a lot of time developing things that are not required. So right from top management to all employees of the organization eventually need to get trained, okay? Otherwise, a simple email click or no use of a VPN in a hotel could have severe issues with not doing that. So successful implementation requires training in the standard. Folks, in this standard, like in every other standard, by the way, it's not about getting the certification. The value is in the journey, thinking carefully about your processes and your controls. So what do we need? The organization needs to have continuous improvement and a cybersecurity defense mechanism built in, and have to have that mentality of protecting the organization. And then further, after implementation, internal auditors are a good line of defense and need to be as knowledgeable as the third parties that audit them. And folks, cybersecurity is more than just meeting customer satisfaction. Today, without cybersecurity, it's almost impossible to do business. And if you have not gotten, attacked, it is just a matter of time, folks. And it's just the way business has gone. By the way, Mike and I will take questions. Feel free to, write your questions. In my Q&A, okay, I see already 2 questions. We'll take that up shortly. All right. So we talked about, this is the introduction to SCS 9001. It's a no cost, on demand. It provides anybody who wants to understand an initial understanding of the purpose, scope, and applicability of the SCS 9001 standard. It's a half-a-day self-learning module. It briefly explains the SCS 9001 handbook and documents, the supply chain security management system architecture, requirements, and controls. It's strongly recommended for those who are going to make decisions in terms of going forward. And then what do you do after that? This is something we recommend. It is not a on-demand class that's built from scratch. We customize this for every organization. And this is really, executives really need to understand what is SCS 9000 about, what is cybersecurity, what is product cybersecurity versus the infrastructure cybersecurity, what are leadership's responsibilities in SCS. And then, of course, the customization comes in. If you do it, especially, sometimes people want to do it before they make the decision. Sometimes they want to make it after they've done the gap analysis. So what are the weaknesses and gaps in your current system? What is the value add from this standard? What is your timeline for implementation? And so on. So this is what the executive overview does. Now we move on from the introduction and the executive overview to the understanding SCS 9001 requirements. This understanding class is for the implementation leader, your auditing group, and the implementation team. You know, honestly, you don't need a vast experience. We would like if you come in with some sort of QMS or quality management systems like ISO 9001, TL 9000, both of them being built on something called the high-level structure of the standard. So is, by the way, the SCS 9001, or maybe 27001. If you come in with that prerequisite understanding, we can build on that knowledge. And by the way, folks, you can see here the cost of the training, and also that we offer it every month. If the demand rises, we can offer more. So all different courses from Omnex and TIA, there's a lot of interaction, and about half or more than half the time is spent in working with things, doing breakout exercises. So here are some of the competencies that we build in and we test. So each competency will be tested, and then there'll be a final exam, only because we want to make sure when you finish, you are capable and you understand the requirements. So interactive instructions with breakout exercises, quizzes, and a final exam. All right. Next, we have in the sort of the sequence, after the understanding, we next need to implement the standard. This again is a 2-day class. It provides guidance for planning and implementing a supply chain security management system. And something it does along the way, we use the same process approach. And it's important we build it on processes. And from an Omnex perspective and a TIA perspective, what we'll try to do is have you come up, build one management system. I'll talk more about this. And if I didn't say that earlier, let me just say this now. There are some strategic decisions executives and the company needs to make in terms of, SCS 9001 should be integrated if you do 27001. You can even integrate it with your QMS or TL 9000 implementation. So in this implementation course, there's a seminar manual, breakout exercises to help them make sure all the participants really understand the implementation process, okay? So some of the competencies that are built in, from planning, the overall implementation project, to doing a gap analysis, into a development of something we call a process map. So the cybersecurity management system builds on the process map of the overall business. It's built into the business. It is not a standalone silo. And then developing, documenting, implementing the cybersecurity processes, the controls, both process controls, and then, there is also controls in Annex A, the 60 different controls. And then implementing the processes, and then making sure you're ready for the certification process. Why is certification important? Certification is important so you can, really communicate to your customer you have met the standard. And of course, you need to flow it out to your supply chain. So this is the last training in the set of trainings that we have, TIA is providing with the SCS 9001, which is auditing. This auditing class is designed for both third-party auditors and the internal auditors in your organization. So each participant, and the focus of this course is on the overall auditing of the SCS 9001. Once you understand the requirements, then how do you audit? How do you plan the stage 1, which is audit planning and documentation review, and then how to conduct the on-site audit, which is called a stage 2. So how do you do a good process audit? And then very importantly, the writing up the non-conformances and the closing meeting. And folks, the benefit to the company comes in when we close out these non-conformities. So those are the different courses and different options. Folks, if you wanted some additional help in controls, we can do that for you. And these courses, you know, can be offered on-site, or you can send 1 or 2 people to our open enrollment training. And the training is going to be done virtually. It reduces your cost. Both the on-site, when we say on-site, it's done just for you. We can come really on-site, or we can do it virtually for you. Okay? So example of what you get from the training. So this is right from 4.2 of the SCS 9001, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So we'll provide you definitions, we'll provide you examples, and then tell you how to think of this in terms of supply chain security. So what do we mean by relevant interested parties? And we tell you they represent significant risk to the organizational sustainability if they're not met. And there are 3 different parties when you look at interested parties. Well, I'm 1 slide ahead of myself. So there are many different internal interested parties, for example, management and staff. And depending on who you are, you have regulatory requirements. And from your customers, contractual requirements. So this is part of the interested parties, a very important start for how you design your SCS 9001. And there are 3 different groups: your internal supply chain team, of course, your customer or stakeholder, and then applicable statutory and regulatory bodies. Of course, you may have other interested parties depending on who you are. So this kind of in-depth understanding of different requirements will come in, both if you think of that, it is very cybersecurity, because understanding what the needs and expectations of your customers, regulatory and internal needs are a very important start, because you design the processes of the organization to meet it, your measurements to meet it, and that's how we start. Okay. All right, now we're in the sort of the tail end here, so we can take questions. We see a lot of questions here that we need to take a look at. What are some implementation strategies? Folks, one of the important things we'd like to say is that it should not be a standalone, isolated system, but we'd like to integrate it. If you have a 27001 system, integrate it. It should be one cybersecurity management system or one ISO 9001, that's your QMS, and we can integrate the SCS 9001 into it. So a significant number of common processes between ISO 9001 and SCS 9001 because of something called a high-level structure. And then definitely 27001 and SCS 9001 share 41 different controls are common between them. So a significant overlap with SCS 9001 and 27001. Of course, 27001 may not have all the controls. We know they don't have all the controls of SCS, or may not have all the processes of SCS, but SCS will have all the processes of 27001 and all the controls of 27001. It's a more robust standard. It is something, if you implement, will satisfy your 27001 needs. We have also done a comparison, and so has TIA with many other standards. And if you're interested in a Department DoD industry standard called CMMC, SCS 9001 can help you in meeting those requirements. So you need to decide what is your implementation strategy. So taking a look at this, there are 60 controls, 41 common controls between SCS 9001 and 27001. And so really, the implementation leader, the implementation team, and your top management need to decide on a strategy. And of course, you integrate it with 27001. Or you might say, I don't have 27001. When I do SCS 9001, I want to get 27001. By the way, you could even get ISO 9001. If you don't have a QMS, you can get that as you implement SCS 9001, okay? Now, only difference between SCS 27001 and ISO 9001 is 27001 has its own Annex A with its own controls, whereas ISO 9001 is really not about cybersecurity, but it has common processes that you can build the SCS 9001 processes from interested party expectation or the context of the business or the overall documentation structure. All right, so really, this is an important sort of decision in terms of what you do, in terms of how you start. Why integrate? In the end of the day, you want to integrate because it saves time and it saves money. By the way, implementation time definitely, but then after that, standalone system versus the integrated system will save tons and tons of money. I did not put down something on standardization. If you are somebody with 7 or 8 different facilities, one implementation, one set of standardized documentation, you can spread that out among all your different organizations. Folks, getting SCS 9001 is not difficult, and it's very, very much needed in today's environment. And I believe this might be my last slide. So we'll stop here, Mike, and we'll take some of the questions we have. Andrew, did you want to read out the questions? Well, let me just pick some of the questions. One of the questions, maybe Mike, you can take this. How can we solve the challenges, especially in the developing countries that have no infrastructure of the internet? What do we have to set as a solution? I
mean, if I understand the question correctly, when it comes to security, it's really a global concern. If there are suspect countries, I think the unfortunate answer at the moment is you should try to maybe stay away from business relationships with them. If they cannot demonstrate an ability to protect your own networks and services with the products and services they deliver to you, I think you got to challenge. You got to challenge whether that's really the right vendor. Now, a lot of times I hear about, well, there's cost, right? And earlier stage companies, they have cost advantages. They don't have big overheads. They're more cost competitive. Start thinking about the total cost of ownership of products and services over the lifetime of using those products and services with an anticipation of a cyber breach of some type. If you think you're saving a few dollars here and there, ending up on the cover of the Wall Street Journal after an attack and a class action lawsuit that could be measured in millions of dollars, what have you really saved? So don't know if I answered the question, but that's it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Question, is this standard being used in the UK? Are there certifications bodies accredited in the UK?
We are in the process right now. This version of the standard, which is the one that we wanted to bring to market, was made available at the end of last year. At that time, then we started working on the training and lining up the certification bodies in preparation for audits. We will be doing a training sometime in the next few weeks as an accelerated training to get some certification bodies up and running. It is intended to be a global standard, so we are definitely looking at global organizations that can provide broad coverage.
So we'll also say, maybe, Mike, talk to your registrar, tell them to contact us now. Maybe there's, they can join one of our programs early, okay? Would you say so?
Excellent. Yeah, excellent point, Chad. If you, for the most efficiency, using a CB that you have used in the past that knows you and your operations, that is the most expeditious path to bringing on this standard. So we would encourage that. If you would want to have them contact us and we can engage with them, or give us a contact, and we'd be glad to do it on your behalf.
Great. Mike, I see two questions, and I think I answered them, but I'll just answer it because they posed a question, I think, earlier in the presentation. How compatible is this standard to integrate with other standards in the cybersecurity landscape? Very well, okay? It even builds on ISO 9001, which is a non-cybersecurity standard, because both are built on the high-level structure. If you have 27001, it will greatly help, okay? In terms of, but of course, we're not going to tell you to do a 27001 system and then do another SCS 9001 system. Yes, you can do it. You might get certified, but essentially not a good idea. Best to have one management system, including one that is your entire QMS, which is either TL 9000 or ISO 9001. So
that's right, Chad.
Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. Yeah, we
please.
maintain the structure of Annex SL to promote integrated standards and management systems.
Absolutely. And Mike runs the TIA meetings, and for the SCS 9001, we are not going to abandon that, the high-level structure and and we'll go right with that, the Annex SL. Suddenly I'm losing my mind. So Mike, I'll take this next question, which is on the executive overview. And is it a customized course, and what is the cost, and how do we set that up? It is actually not very expensive at all. It'll be like a one-day training cost. Please do contact us, and we can definitely set it up for you, either to make the SCS 9001 decision or to take the results of the gap analysis and explain to your top management why this is so beneficial, and where's the value, and what are the leadership responsibilities, because leadership is very important that we keep them engaged in it. And I'd like to, there was one question asked earlier, Mike. I'd like to answer that, and I'd like your take on it. And to me, today, something like SCS 9001 is the entry. Pretty soon, if you don't have something like this, when your customer evaluates you, they're not going to accept us. I can tell you, as a software provider, somebody asked, we were 27001, but this customer specifically wanted another standard on top of it, okay? And so it's very good to have very stringent standards that everybody recognizes as very stringent. So it is really not who's going to pay for this, but it's really about continuing to be a viable business. Anything you wanted to add to that, Mike?
No, I think that says it well, Chad.
Okay, thank you. I mean, this is what I've seen time and time again as innovation happens in the lives that we live. I've told you, I've spent about 40 years now, working with many different industries and many different sectors, I will call it, and many, changes happening. This is a change. It is a change because of bad actors out there and the technology that we're doing. This is just the cost of doing business, folks. So a very specific question on what exactly does that mean that SCS 9001 implementation can be combined? I forget what word was with ISO 27000. If you already have ISO 27000, what we can do is integrate it so the maintenance is less expensive. There's a maintenance cost for 27001 and SCS 9001. Maybe your registrar could even do an integrated audit, reducing your cost. And of course, the bigger cost is not about auditing, it's about maintaining all the different processes. So when you talk about integration of cybersecurity processes, there's only one set of cybersecurity processes, And with these one set of cybersecurity processes, I always say, forget all these shalls, because I look at these standards and they're all shall. Mandatory requirements. One set of processes satisfies every shall out there. Focus on your processes and your cybersecurity controls, and then everything else comes into place. Let's see here. There's some specific questions on participants and discounts and things like that. I don't think we have talked about any discounts, but definitely we're quite open in terms of if you have a number of participants, we can definitely talk discounts. No problem with that, right, Mike?
Absolutely agree. We want to encourage adoption, and we'll help people as best as we can.
We definitely will. From the services point of view, so as a service organization, what does SCS 9001 add that ISO 27001 does not? I'm going to take that as the, I'll say this, I didn't come prepared for this. I just sent my team who are listening in. I made them do all these detailed analysis between all these different standards. And I did tell you, I also know both the standards. I can just tell you there are some common processes and many different processes that provide additional cybersecurity controls. ISO 27001 does not go into the detail of telling you that you need network security. It doesn't go into the detail of saying when you send equipment out for maintenance, you need to have cybersecurity controls and how exactly it should be done. How do you exactly deal with your supply base? None of that is in ISO 27001. I love ISO 27001. I think it's a great standard, but please don't think I'm dissing it. All I'm saying is answering your question, what does SCS 9001 do that 27001 does not? And I have to say a deep focus on the product development, the networks in your organization, how you deal with your suppliers, all from clause 8.0. But there's many, many more that my brain is not immediately jumping at. Mike, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just that. I mean, there's a flurry of activity around cyber security and more recently supply chain security. People are trying to figure out, which paths to go down, which standards are best aligned with them. And look, there's no cure-all. There's no one standard that is going to solve all your problems. Certain can be used in harmony with one another. We have and will continue to develop very detailed collateral to demonstrate the contrast between this standard and others. 27001 is one that's being worked on right now. I should have had it out by now. It's not out yet. It's the top priority. I would ask you to check the website on occasion. You'll see a variety of collateral up there now, and you'll see new things populated on the website over the next several weeks.
Okay. So very specific question, Mike, on scoping this SCS 9001 certificate. I could answer that if you'd like, or if you could answer that. Is that, do we do it by product, by site, by requirements, and so on? Okay. Would you like to take that, or would you like me to take that on?
Well, I'll make one comment, and then by all means, chat.
Please.
For those that are familiar with the TL standard, TL certifies a product. SCS certifies an organization. So there may be elements of the organization that you don't think apply, and you can certainly define that in the scope. And then there's other provisions within the standard itself to call out what parts and requirements you don't think apply. And that's a discussion that would take place between the auditor. But it provides flexibility for your particular use case. But the important thing to remember is it certifies organizations, not products.
Thank you, Mike. So we'll say that, think of it by site. But I can think of many complicated, I'm a third-party auditor also, and I actually ran a registrar. So because of that, this question makes me think you have a business with a site that does multiple products for multiple different industries, okay? And also this question assumes that maybe there's a cost to putting controls in place, okay? Once you have the controls in place, is there a cost for adding another line in place? Something to think about, okay? So think site, but then in the end of the day, if you have two different products, two different industries, what do you do? Okay, it's something we need to have more deeper discussion. That's okay. If we already have TL 9000, so that's a QMS, that's for the telecommunications industry, run by the TIA Quest, and ISO 27001, do you have an implementation strategy for SCS 9001 that maximally exploits that? Yes, absolutely. The first question would be, is your QMS, meaning the TL 9000 and 27001, integrated? If it's not, we would ask you to integrate it. And on top of that, you would build the SCS 9001, okay? That will be the least cost way to implement. Maybe hard to think about it, but once you figure out how to do it, is the least cost to implement and to maintain. I hope you don't mind that quick answer. I think we're past the hour. Let me go to the very end here. And
Hey, Chad?
yes, please, Mike.
Will we be able to get a copy of all questions raised? I'd like to provide a response to all of them.
Thank you. We can email them, right,
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
So question, will this webinar be hosted again? I have others in my organization that couldn't attend. And Mike, we can think about maybe running this maybe a month from now or so, right?
Sure, I'm glad to do it.
We would have a tape of this one, Crystal. But if you'd like us to do it live for another session, we are happy to do it because we really believe in the standard and we'd really like for you, your organization to understand how and why it's very important. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for TIA Quest on behalf of Mike Regan and myself from Omnex, Chad Kymal.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.